Hey, friend, welcome to the Dyslexic Maverick podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Disbrow. I'm a wife, mom, entrepreneur, and recovering HR exec turned keynote speaker, executive coach, and organizational consultant for everything ADHD and dyslexia in the workplace. As someone who was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD later in life, I'm here to encourage and equip you to embrace that unique neurospicy noggin of yours. I believe everyone has a beautifully wired brain, and I'm here to help you maximize it so you can live your best life. I'm Nancy, and this is the Dyslexic Maverick podcast. Welcome back to the Dyslexic Maverick podcast. I am so excited for you as listeners, as well as myself, to learn today from Alyssa Garrity. Alyssa, I actually found on a Facebook group post, I had reached out. Specifically, I wanted to do this podcast, and I'll kind of explain more soon. But Alyssa reached out and said that she would be more than happy to kind of educate us on the topic of classical education with dyslexia and more about the science of reading for our children that struggle with some of those learning challenges. So, just a quick story of kind of like lead in of how we got here. Our family decided to send our youngest son to a classical academy 2 years ago. And he was struggling more on the ADHD side, but certainly has dyslexia too. And it has been the best experience for him in a learning situation. And I know that that's true because of the way they teach, but I also can't describe it to other parents when they ask me. And so when I found Alyssa, I was just so excited that somebody would come on and share what she knows and more about the classical education system and how it just works well, because I think that there's a lot of fears around that the system as well, and maybe some of the challenges that are associated, but there's so many benefits. So Alyssa is a certified speech pathologist. She has been working in public schools for 12 years and has over a decade of experience with children with learning disabilities, everywhere from preschool up to 12th grade. She really focuses on helping them grow their language and development, communication skills, and works really closely with special education teams and collaborating with teachers and parents, which I personally appreciate. Most recently, Alyssa's interest in the connection between speech sounds and literacy skills has led her to pursue additional training in the science of reading, which we'll dig into. And currently, Alyssa works as a lead teacher and a second and third grade teacher at a classical school in Lenexa, Kansas. Did I say Lenexa right?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the Dyslexic Maverick podcast, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our chat today.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you mind just kind of telling listeners maybe how you got started in just the speech pathology world, and then maybe what led you to the classical education side?
I always knew I wanted to work in some form of education, but I wasn't sure if a traditional classroom teacher role was the right fit for me. I liked the idea of working more individually with students and in small groups with students. So that led me to the career of speech pathology. I worked as a speech pathologist in the public schools for 12 years, preschool through high school, but mostly with the elementary population. So I worked with kiddos with articulation delays, language delays, other communication disorders. And throughout my time in the schools, I just began to develop more and more of an interest in the connection between speech sounds, literacy, language. I worked with some really amazing teachers and learned so much from them. But I also just began to feel like, in many ways, that there was just way more that we could do to help help students struggling with language development and reading skills. Fast forward to a little over a year ago, and an opportunity arose for me to teach at a new collaborative classical school in our area. This really piqued my interest, and at the time I was homeschooling my son while trying to work as a speech pathologist. My son is a voracious reader, and when I began to learn more about just the model of classical education, I realized that this challenging, rigorous model of education could be a great fit for him. So my purpose in transitioning from the field of speech pathology to working as a traditional classroom teacher at a classical school was really twofold, primarily enrolling my son in the school would allow me to both give him a rigorous education, but also to be deeply involved in his education in the collaborative model. And then, secondly, I was able to just take all of that experience and knowledge, child development, literacy that I gained working in the schools, and use that to teach in a more traditional classroom role and in a place where I just really believed in the mission and the vision and the method of education.
Yeah. Can we pause for 1 second? So a collaborative classical school, can you maybe kind of just high level it? What's the difference and what does that look like for parents and
And sure, maybe a term that people are more familiar with would be hybrid model. So we meet on campus Mondays and Wednesdays, and students receive a full day of school: math, reading, science, art, music, recess. And then they have a full day of school Mondays and Wednesdays on campus, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays at home with their parents. So teachers provide parents with an assignment sheet. The school provides students with the curriculum, and parents provide the teaching at home Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then Fridays are a flex day.
that sounds so much more manageable from a parent experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's been a wonderful fit for us.
That's awesome. And even from the children's experience, I know, some of I think homeschooling is becoming so much more popular and less stigmatized, I guess, but it's also great that they have the peer-to-peer aspect of it as well. Like it sounds like a really good combination of
Ab- Absolutely. In my view, it's been the best of both worlds. For my son, especially as an only child, he's able to get that interaction with peers on Mondays and Wednesdays. And we have that great community that's forming. As the schools we're still in our first year. So we're wrapping up our first year. So just seeing that community come together, those peer relationships, but then also I get to spend that one on one time with him at home the rest of the week, which has been really special.
that sounds just like an amazing combination. So what sparked your interest just with working with differently wired brains?
Yeah, sure. So early in my career, I was working as a speech pathologist at an elementary school and working really closely with those elementary special education resource teachers. And we used to talk just a lot about speech, language development, literacy. I think it's important to pause just for a minute and define language. So, language involves the process of four things: speaking and listening, reading and writing. And I think traditionally in the schools, I would say most speech pathologists work on that speaking and listening aspect of language. Whereas the special education resource teacher, if a student is receiving extra services, they might work with the resource teacher on that reading and writing aspect of language. And as time went on, I just had this increasing sense that we can't separate and isolate those aspects of language. They're complex, they're interwoven, they're interdependent. All of that to look back and say, in my early years of working in this field, I just realized, I went into this field thinking, I'm going to help students produce their speech sounds clearly. Students with delayed speech are at a greater risk of having a reading delay. Sounds are the basis of language. So, in order to speak, we have to be able to produce the sounds. In order to listen well, we have to have the phonological representation of those sounds organized well in our brains. In order to read, we have to be able to have both a deep understanding of the sounds and to be able to produce the sounds. In order to write well, we have to be able to retrieve those sounds for spelling. So, if my work as a speech pathologist in helping a student to learn to speak clearly and produce speech sounds accurately doesn't also lead to increased literacy for this student, then I failed. I haven't done all that I could do for that student.
When you put that together, like, you just did such an amazing job. I just wanna I'm like, I'm almost speechless thinking about it because so many of the young children that aren't so young anymore, right? Like, my son and daughter my son definitely had speech challenges growing up, and I didn't even though I was more aware of the dyslexia side of things by the time he was getting ready for school, it's so common, and then when you break it down, well, of course, you need sounds to make words, and you need to hear them, and you need to break them apart. It all makes so much more sense hearing you say that, and
Sure,
it's one of those kind of key signs of just because a child maybe needs some extra speech help doesn't mean that they're dyslexic, right? I don't wanna
sure,
go that far,
sure.
but also it's one of those kind of light bulb moments for some parents of like, other things aren't adding up exactly right. And if that's like another kind of tick on the checklist, I think it would at least warrant a little bit further investigation. Would you agree?
Sure, absolutely. Having a speech sound delay does not mean that your child is dyslexic, but it could possibly be an indicator that, just like you said, there might be other things going on, and it's worth it to explore that.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I took him to speech, like, I would thought he was just working on speech. But, like, when you say it, you're like, "Well, no, of course you've got to" like, all the 4 different parts all commingle, and he's never gonna be able to read well if he can't break apart sounds or put them together. And if he's not hearing them correctly or pronouncing them I mean, it's just it makes so much sense. So sorry, I'm just, like, in awe of what you just said that was, like, so simple, but so profound at the same time. So how has your training really in the science of reading helped shape the way you teach now?
Yeah, absolutely. There's currently throughout our country and as educators a resurgence of direct instruction in phonics. So this is a whole other podcast episode, but just very briefly, for several decades, we as a country moved towards what they call a whole language approach. This is also a rather controversial topic. People have strong feelings on both sides of the camp. And so we moved to this whole language approach rather than directly teaching phonics for decades. Well, it didn't work well. So 30% of students in fourth grade in our country can read at or above grade level. That's less than a third. So this is, as a country, we're slowly shifting back to this direct instruction in phonics as the research continues to reveal the truth about learning to read, which is in order that we provide our children with the best possible literacy outcomes, we need direct, explicit, systematic instruction in phonics and language. So my training in the science of reading just has deeply impacted my teaching and helped me to gain a greater understanding just of the interwoven aspects of language, the benefits of direct phonics and spelling instruction. My husband works as a high school special education teacher in the public schools and is currently completing the LETTERS training, which is a 2-year program that trains teachers in the best practices in reading instruction. He just finished his first year. And we're both planning to attend an Orton Gillingham Academy training this summer, and we're really looking forward to that. So we're continuing our journey, and it's really fun that we can do that together.
That is amazing. There's a great podcast series about the science of reading and kind of the background story of it, and the name's escaping me right now.
Is it Sold a Story?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Highly recommend for anyone who wants to learn more about where our country has been and how we got there and where our country is headed with reading instruction.
Yeah, it is so scary. I mean, just to reiterate, you've said 30% of 4th graders are reading at grade level or above.
Absolutely. So less than 1/3 of our students in our country are proficient in reading at grade level.
And I agree, this could be a whole separate podcast. Maybe we'll do a follow-up, but that's scary, right? That is so scary for our country, for our next generation. I can tell you even growing up, I'm 42, I was probably taught the whole language model as well because I didn't get it, and I know my parents looking back were like, I don't remember being taught any of the rules at all. Now, was I taught some of them? Maybe. Like, I was just so underwater at that point that I don't remember, but I don't think even being 40 so we've got generations.
Absolutely. And just to give you two very short anecdotal examples, working in the schools, my first year in an elementary school, we had a parent of a third grader just desperate for help with reading. He was struggling, struggling, struggling. She met with our team and was just asking, when is he going to start to make progress? And come to find out, and I realized our school doesn't have a phonics curriculum. Our district doesn't have a phonics curriculum. It's being pieced together, piece by piece, left up to each teacher to kind of just make their best judgment as to how to teach reading, and it wasn't working. We are failing our students. Our students missed, our students in high school now missed phonics instruction And we are seeing the repercussions of that right now.
Yeah, I think we just need to keep saying this more and more, right? Honestly, it wasn't until I started to dig in that I really understood how bad it was and how scary it is for the children who are graduating, going out into the world. And as a former HR leader, like I was trying to hire these people and then getting frustrated with why they couldn't write an email correctly and why their grammar wasn't great. And it wasn't necessarily because of dyslexia either, right? Like it was just like poor education in the system. So let's switch over because I really want to kind of dig into the classical education model. So as a parent, I love the classical education for everything that it stood for, like as a whole. Like I feel like it's more patriotic and just a really well-rounded, very common sense approach to education. And it goes back to 40, 50 years ago of how they used to teach, which I appreciated. But it also scared me as a parent because having dyslexic children, I knew that there was more reading. Like you were saying with your son, like your son was a voracious reader. And so that probably wouldn't have scared me as much if I had that situation. But with especially my son, it's like writing a sentence was hard. Reading anything more than a sentence or two was like painful to get him to do. And so it scared me, but I also knew that he's so smart in so many ways that either way, the educational, like, just process is going to be tough for dyslexics. I don't think that there's any way around that. That's just but it also builds resilience and grit and all these great things too, right? So, it's just part of the unfair process that we go through that also has benefits later in life. But the Latin, I mean, there's just so many different like the word problems, the math itself is so much more rigorous as far as like actual practical. Like it's not just memorizing a formula. Like you actually have to apply it and figure it out. And I don't want to go too far into the math side, but can you tell me just like a little bit more about I guess like why it does work for dyslexic
Yeah,
brain?
absolutely. Yeah. I could dedicate a significant amount of time just to talking about classical education itself. But in order to stay focused, as it specifically relates to dyslexia, I would say that classical education is intentional and systematic. Classical education is teacher led, whereas public schools, we are seeing in the public schools more and more student led learning, learning on screens or devices. I'm not here to criticize public schools today. I learned so much from the teachers and the teams that I worked with, and I wouldn't be here today without that experience. But in classical education, it goes back to the basics of direct instruction in grammar and vocabulary. It strives to cultivate a love of literature in students. So for the most part, public schools are seeking to produce students that are college and career ready. The goal of classical education is not only to help students guide them to college and careers, help them to learn to read and write, but also to really develop character, virtue, wisdom, the ability to think and reason effectively. So I think classical education is an amazing fit for students with dyslexia because most classical schools, at least that I've been aware of thus far, they're implementing very well what students with dyslexia desperately need, which is rigorous and systematic instruction in phonics, spelling, grammar, exposure to great literature, and a rich language environment.
So our son started in 4th grade, which I wish it would have even been 3rd, right? I mean, obviously kindergarten would have been great, but even 3rd, so he did miss some of the foundational literacy pieces that we've had to kind of make up and catch up on. And truthfully, he still is, even at the end of 5th grade now. He's still kind of making up. One thing I always love to say to parents is that and I think this is typical with most classical education models, is that they really everything is in cursive handwriting. And so cursive for dyslexics is so much more effective because it's like the looping together, you're not stopping and starting each letter. And so it lets our brains flow a little bit easier. The letters look a little bit different. And I think it helps just like with some of the reversals too, at least with our son, it did. And he taught himself cursive in 2.5 weeks. Like the first 2 weeks of 4th grade. I mean, out of right like he had to but not ideal but students can do it and I think it's important just to like highlight like always best if we can get them started in kindergarten and get them learning, just in a very like systematic, like you said, way. But even if it is a little bit later, it can still children are so adaptable and resilient. Can you talk a little bit about like the foundational, because you teach second and third grade. So what is the second and third grade reading, writing curriculum? What are you working on at that age?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit here, but really in the classical model, we focus on the trivium, which is just how our method of education is structured. So we have the grammar stage in K through roughly fifth grade, then the logic stage, roughly middle school, and the rhetoric stage in high school. And what that is basically it mirrors our development. And so kiddos in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, in terms of the language arts curriculum, they're receiving direct instruction in handwriting and cursive. They are receiving direct instruction in phonics and spelling. They're practicing reading aloud. They're working on fluency. We're reading great works of children's literature and poetry and exposing them to that rich background information and rich language environment, vocabulary. It's really important to take a step back with our kiddos in kindergarten and first and second grade and work on the handwriting, work on the letter formation. In the grammar stage in a classical school in kindergarten, first and second grade, we work on a lot of copy work and dictation. So we're not asking a student, as my son was in kindergarten, in his first quarter of kindergarten in the public schools, we're not asking them to write a sentence in a paragraph their first quarter of kindergarten. We're focusing on exposing them to copy work. We're getting that pencil to the paper, that mechanical process of writing, and practicing that with copy work over and over and over again. We're getting them comfortable with the mechanical process of writing, and then transitioning to dictation to help them not just see and copy those words, but to start to hear and retrieve those sounds as they're writing more independently, so that when they get to third grade and have a more structured composition class, they have all that practice with handwriting, copywork, dictation that they can draw from. And it's mirroring their development, providing them with stepping stones to lead them to composition, and not just starting with composition from day one. So we're scaffolding that instruction for them and giving them that opportunity to practice so that when they get to composition, they're comfortable with that mechanical process of writing. And I feel just developmentally, it's a much more intentional process.
It feels much more realistic. And
Yeah.
again, you break this down so simply. I love it. Right, like to ask a child in kindergarten or first grade to create a sentence, right? There's like the brainstorming process, there's a word formation of making it sound like a sentence, but then there's the paper to pencil situation as well, which they haven't learned yet. That's just so many things to throw at a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old. It sounds crazy actually when you say it versus the copy work of getting the foundational kind of the orthographic skills and just like that muscle memory down first. Can you kind of touched on it. So K through 5th is really about grammar. And then what does it
Mhm.
go like 6th through 8th grade is typically more what?
Sure, the logic stage. So in that stage, kiddos are working more on critical thinking, understanding cause and effect, asking questions, starting to analyze. That's roughly 7th through ninth grade. And then the rhetoric stage, students are focusing more on expression and persuasion at a higher level.
At the end of the day, I always loved to hire people that were just critical thinkers, right? Like
Mm. Mm-hmm.
they just questioned things, right? Not because it was wrong or right or anything. They just thought about it. And you can tell that a lot of our school system is just about, getting the facts right on a test and it's A, B, C, or D, and that's it. And then they pass and they can lose it all versus actually using that information to form an argument and to think critically about the other side.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I will say that there is a good amount of memorization in the classical education system too, which truthfully, that's one of the parts that I've probably struggled with as a parent myself of
Mm-hmm.
now our son has came in in third grade, he had to do public speaking and one 5-minute thing in third grade in the public school and was literally traumatized, like couldn't do it, had a stomach ache, all these things. Going into fourth grade, we learned that he's got to stand up every 2 weeks and have a recitation of a poem. And it's not words that we say normally, right? Like it's like older
Sure.
English. And so internally, the mom in me was legit panicking
Hmm.
about how, oh my gosh, what did I sign him up for? And how are either of us going to get through this? And magically, I would say it took about a quarter. Like the first quarter was just new and felt weird, but there was never that panic that
Mm.
he felt in the public school, which I still can't really explain, but he has become very good at memorization, and I think I struggle with we have Google, we have all these things, right, that we can pull information from, but can you maybe just, like, high level talk about why memorization is important?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, your story resonates a little bit with my story. My son started at this classical school where I'm teaching in third grade. And so he's not a struggling reader, but when our headmaster handed all of us teachers and parents the memory work booklet for the year, I thought I I don't see how this is going to be possible. I questioned, I doubted, but I'm a believer now. You know, we're almost to the end of the first year, and I'm a believer. It's been unbelievable what my second and third grade students and kindergarten and first graders at our school have been able to memorize. Our kindergartners memorized the first 160 timeline events of history, complete with hand motions. Our third graders have memorized lengthy passages of text. Our second and third graders have memorized several poems, 68 events of the timeline, just 70 phonograms in our phonics program, 28 spelling rules. It's just been absolutely amazing. We underestimate our kids. I was underestimating my son. I was underestimating my own students. They are a sponge at this stage, and we've all heard that. Children are a sponge at this stage. They can do exponentially more than we even realize. Those elements or tools of learning, such as memorization, recitation, chanting, Socratic dialogue, those things that you'll see in a classical school, they provide an additional avenue or opportunity for students to have success other than just taking a test. They're exercising that modality of learning to help activate their learning, engage their attention. So maybe a student is struggling to read a passage or a text. But if they hear that information over and over again, they memorize it, they recite that passage, it's helping support their language development and overall literacy in a fun, I think, in a fun and rewarding way. So I would say those tools, memorization, recitation, Socratic dialogue, that engaging in the question asking, those give students another way to interact with material and have great success using that auditory modality of learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I've actually seen like the confidence grow. Jack, I think will always I don't usually say his name, but will always probably struggle with reading a little bit, as do I, right? As an adult, it doesn't mean that it will hold him back in his career, but it's not his first love either. However, the confidence I've seen from the recitations
Mm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
speaking and just learning different words and understanding and even like the almost pre-Latin that I'm kind of seeing
Mm-hmm.
come into play at this point and him learning root words and understanding that it is and quite honestly, he can outperform our 2 high schoolers in many ways of saying all of the adverbs or the adjectives. It is I love it. It is just so cool to 1, to know that he can do it, and 2, to see his confidence just kind of explode when he does it
Mm.
is I think an underestimated piece of the equation sometimes.
Yeah, that's
What
amazing.
Yeah, it's fun to watch, and it makes those hard days a little bit better too, right? Because there are
Sure.
hard days. The classical education system is not easy. Like, it is not one that just pushes children through and says, "It's fine, you're good enough to go,"
Sure.
which I also appreciate that it's
It's rigorous. Yeah. And there have been days where towards the beginning I questioned, am I up for this? Can we do this? But I would just, encourage parents and listeners to think about, is it worth it? Is it worth it for our kids? It's harder. Would it be easier for me to just homeschool and kind of do our own thing at our own pace? Yeah. Would it be easier for my son to attend a public school and I could just work while he goes to school? Yeah, that would be easier. But hard is not the same thing as bad. And we it's worth it. It's worth it for our kids. It's been exponentially worth it for my kiddo, just looking back at all the things that we've done over the last year. And is it challenging? Yes, but our kids can do it. We're underestimating them. We're underestimating ourselves. And it's challenging and it's rigorous, but it's been so rich and so rewarding and so worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any other things that you commonly hear that like parents may have like maybe a misconception about with the classical education model that we could talk about?
Yeah, sure. So I think it depends on each particular student and each parent's particular understanding of classical education. But I think there could possibly be an assumption, like we've discussed, that a rigorous school with a lot of required reading might not be a good fit for that child. Parents might wonder if their child could maintain that rigorous pace. But that kind of goes back to what we were talking about in classical education. We aren't just using assessments to measure success. We're looking at the whole development of the child using multiple modalities of learning to measure growth and success. And so I think that one thing we need to continue to work on just as educators, as a nation, is just raising awareness of working towards earlier screening and intervention with students who might be at a greater risk to struggle with reading. If we can get started early, even before kindergarten, and teaching those sounds and phonological awareness, and then definitely by kindergarten, providing that direct instruction in phonics and spelling, I think a classical school that is providing direct, explicit, systematic instruction in spelling, reading, phonological awareness, and handwriting is an amazing fit for a student with dyslexia. An older child transitioning to a classical school from another model of learning in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, they may still need to supplement with that outside therapy or reading intervention to help address any gaps or deficits or help them catch up with skills that maybe weren't previously directly taught. But if you can start earlier, the earlier the better. And if you can start later and fill in those gaps if needed with outside therapy, I think it's a fantastic option.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And we kind of went into it with the thought of let's just give it a year and see what
Mm-hmm.
happens, right? Like
Mm,
it doesn't have to be the lifelong commitment. And I think sometimes, I mean, we would never advocate for changing our children's school every year or going back and forth or anything like that. But it also, I think it just made it a little bit easier, more palatable of, hey, we're going to give this a try and we're going to see. And also maybe if it gets too hard, then we'll have a conversation. But for right now, this is absolutely the best education that he could be getting. And that's the most important thing. So we
mm,
will do it as long as we can. And if we need to have another discussion, we can. I think it's also critical, and I don't know if this is true with all schools. Our classical academy has been around, I believe it's 5 years, 5 or 6 years now, but we do have a 504 intervention teacher within the school.
mm,
With Yeah, we do the 504 meetings just like I do with my daughter's in public high school. It's the same process. We don't have to. It's not like the Catholic schools where we have to go, to the local school district to get it done.
mhm,
So they're in the schools. He has the extra support. He's got the 504 plan to support him, and quite honestly, he just doesn't need it as much because it's already structured in a way. He also struggles with ADHD, and the ADHD part, I mean, having multiple recesses a day, having, either art or music each day. There's just so many different ways that the day is structured that also helps that he
mm,
doesn't need all of the supports because it's really just built in a way that supports all of our brains in a better, more efficient way. Yeah, so I think those sometimes those aren't talked about as much, but it is, from a parent perspective, like it really is built better
mm.
than the traditional
Yeah,
public school, I think.
that's amazing. It's amazing that your son has access to that support with his 504, even in your classical school.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure it's not the same, and I know a lot of classical schools are building right now as you are in yours, and it might not have been in year 1 or 2, but I will say that our classical school is growing very quickly. I think more and more parents are becoming aware of it, which is part of the reason that I wanted us to have the discussion today too, because I think more parents are looking for these resources and just, like, real conversations about it. So that's awesome. I also think kind of transitioning to and everything I do on the dyslexia and ADHD side is all with like a positive strength kind of based approach as well. And I have seen, and I think I will begin to see more, but I'd love your insight on this, like the benefits of dyslexic thinking in the classical education model. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll sound like a broken record here, but I'll say it again. If a student is struggling with reading in any way, that child absolutely needs direct, explicit, teacher led, systematic instruction in reading. So I think classical education does this so well. In the public schools, they might be hitting on some of these skills. Some schools are forging ahead with the science of reading, and some districts have implemented great phonics curriculums. That's amazing. Some districts aren't quite there yet. So the teaching of phonics and spelling and grammar and vocabulary can be a little bit haphazard. Students with dyslexia can't afford haphazard, a willy nilly approach to learning to read. So, firstly, I would again just say providing that rich language instruction and direct instruction in reading is so important. But then using those multiple modalities to engage learners is where those students with dyslexia might really be able to shine. So the memorization, recitation, discussion, songs, jingles, rhymes, chants, creative expression through art, drawing, hands-on projects. Those things just all provide awesome opportunities for students in classical schools, a variety of differently wired brains and learners to engage, demonstrate what they've learned in other ways other than simply taking a test.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's truly the balanced education of it's not just about getting the answers right on the test, although there are certainly those too. It is about the whole person and making sure that they get the whole educational model, right? And it does include art and history and creative expression and music and just all these different aspects that are really integrated very well. Again, I don't know if this is our school in particular, but if they're learning something in history, they're also doing an art project that correlates to the same time period. And it brings the whole picture together and they're learning the same songs in the music class and they're doing science projects that tie along with that. And it just makes the whole experience flow throughout the day so much more, I don't know, like it just makes more sense, I think, for the children too.
Absolutely. I've seen the same thing in classical education, just that integration of learning across subjects. It's not just isolated skills that we're practicing here and there. It's such an intentional scope and sequence of study and the integration of subjects across classes and over the years. It's just amazing to see the light bulb moments that students have and to see them start to make those connections.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think even like as the children progress up and through, the middle school, high school, the critical thinking and the pattern recognition and trying to become just a more diverse thinker, honestly, I
Mhm.
think it becomes almost more valuable because you've learned the skills, right? Like you now know how to write a sentence and speak well and do all the foundational pieces and now you get to use it in a way that's creative to your brain and unique to your brain, right? Because you're having discussions. You're not just reading a book or a passage, you're talking about it and you're challenging each other and you're really using your brain. I mean, I can only imagine these high schoolers are coming home just as exhausted as the little ones at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so rich and rewarding, and we're not quite there yet in the logic and rhetoric stage in our school, but I can't wait to see what that holds for our kiddos.
So how do you with different thinkers, I think it is it can be challenging with the confidence piece, really. I mean, school's challenging for every child, right? Whether it's like the social aspect for some kids, the reading aspect for others, or just, I mean, there's always a struggle for each of us every day, right? I always tell people when I'm coaching, like, we have no idea what everyone else is going through, right? You're in line at Starbucks and you're thinking like,
Yeah.
you have no idea what that person in front of you or behind you is
Hmm.
dealing with today. But how do you help your children that you work with like really build that confidence within their school day?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first, I would just say in our school in particular, we use a program called Spell to Write and Read for phonics and spelling. So, students learn 70 phonograms. We have all kinds of different words for in phonics: diphthongs, digraphs, vowel teams. We're overcomplicating it. Those are phonograms. A phonogram is just 1 to 4 letters that represent a sound. So, for example, CH says ch, k, sh, depending on the context, depending on the word. Our students have their own spelling log. They memorize the 70 phonograms. They learn 20 new spelling words every week. They learn the corresponding phonograms and spelling rules that go along with those words. And at the end of the year, they've studied and learned roughly 600 new words. Just breaking that down and teaching them directly, I've seen just amazing progress in my students' confidence, decoding, spelling. I think again, just that consistent, systematic process, that application of phonograms and the spelling rules, I think have played a huge role in supporting their growth and their confidence. So I think that confidence is just about repetition, practice, encouragement, lots of praise, taking whatever skills they have and building from there. And just that culture of excellence and peer modeling in a classical school as well, I think that plays a huge role in motivating students to do well and excel further still. We have some really strong readers in our school, and we have some kiddos in across the grades who started the year who didn't maybe quite yet have that love of reading. And now some of those students are consistently grabbing a book from our little classroom library to read at home. Having that just culture of excellence, we can spur one another on, and we can, use real actual books. If students have access to books, they'll grab a book to read. If students have access to iPads, they'll grab an iPad. It's really been a joy to see the students just light up when new books are added to our bookshelf every week. And they're just immediately drawn to what's new on our bookshelf. And it's just been a joy to see their interest and excitement in reading great books. I think that's just another example of classical education. It's not just great for students with dyslexia, but for any student. The classroom environment is carefully curated to just give every opportunity, whenever possible, to point students to what's true and good and beautiful. It's not just about performing well on a standardized test. We want students to engage and create and delight and wonder and savor that experience of learning so that they'll become a lifelong learner themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, it is you're so right. I mean, if you give them the option of technology, of course they're going to pick it, right? Even as an adult, it's so hard not to go
Sure.
to my
Yeah.
phone the first thing in the morning, right? And I
Yes.
I know better. So of course these little brains aren't going to make the right choices if we give them too many options, but
Sure.
it's amazing the classic literature that they read
Mm.
and they enjoy. They're great stories. We've just all forgotten about them, I think, or some of us have forgotten about them.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
That's awesome. As far as like neurodivergent learners go, are there any accommodations that you see that help students in the classroom, like whether they're in a 504 plan or not? Just as a teacher, what do you kind of do to help those brains maybe get through a day? I'm even picturing like ADHD and just kind of like getting those wiggles out for the little kids that they can't sit for too long or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Every school's different, every classroom's different, every teacher is different. Students have different needs from year to year. So obviously it's going to vary a bit. But just one thing in particular in our school, we cap our class size at 16 students. So I think first and foremost, those smaller class sizes allow us to be able to give more specific feedback to students, identify and address needs as they arise. But with my background in special education, I feel that I'm just, you know, extra sensitive to those students with that have a variety of learning styles and just aware of their needs. We have strict expectations for our students in terms of behavior and attentiveness, but at the same time, I try to allow flexibility in our classroom to accommodate different styles of learning. We have some students who like to complete their math work on the rug, or one student who likes to wear noise canceling headphones to help them focus. We have a full and rigorous day of learning on Mondays and Wednesdays, but I allow movement breaks. We do planks and mountain climbers and burpees to our grammar jingles. We do dance breaks to our grammar jingles. I'm a firm believer that using movement helps to activate our brains and to help engage our learning. So private schools might not always have the staffing to accommodate significant learning differences, such as our school, but we try to be creative if there's small ways that we can help to accommodate a student, allowing them to do the copy work from their desk rather than copying from the whiteboard, getting extra practice reading aloud with a strong peer model when I'm working with another student. So any way that we can make those small accommodations, we try to do that whenever possible.
Yeah. From a brain science perspective, I've seen with my son, it's really helpful. Like they go to the gym and it's not like gym class. I mean, they probably learn basketball, but it's not basketball. It's like a workout, right? Like it's a
Mm-hmm.
mini boot camp. They do push-ups, sit-ups, a run each day. And I think from a brain perspective, it's really helpful to when you're sitting in the seat, and this is older, right? So like he's 10, 11, 12-year-old kind of group. But when they're sitting in the seat, they're working, like their brains are engaged and
Mm-hmm.
you're cueing your brain to get focused and get down to work. And then when you get up and you're going to a different room or like that's the time to take a break and to laugh and giggle and, make whatever they do at 11 years old. I probably
Mm-hmm.
don't want to know. But, and then when they're back in their seat, they're ready to go and they've had the break, they've got their water and they're back in it. And just cueing your brain in those ways, I think it's really helpful. Even in the workplace, we do the same thing, right? I'm like, get your cup of coffee, set your routine, get everything done, get ready to focus, and then get to work. And so it can help. It can help in all ways, but I think it just really helps to break up the day like that. And then when you're sitting at work, you're working. Like it is not game time when you're sitting in your desk.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely seen that with my kiddos, that those movement breaks help to just re-engage our bodies, re-engage our brains in learning. My students have loved to do phonogram relay races outside at the end of the day. They've loved to do multiplication relay races outside, and they just absolutely love it. And then their bodies are calm, they're ready to learn again. And so, yeah, huge believer in movement breaks for kiddos.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. This has been one of just the best conversations. As we wrap up, I'd just love to highlight just a couple more questions.
Sure.
What should parents look for when they're looking at a classical school and they might have a child that's potentially struggling or just maybe has like some type of learning difference that they're a little bit worried about?
Sure, absolutely. I think every situation is unique, but you'd want to consider class size, curriculum. What curriculum is a school using for language arts? Is it a program? Do they have a phonics program that aligns with the science of reading? If you don't know the answers to those questions, could you find someone to reach out to who could mentor you and help you look into those things? Are they directly teaching phonics, grammar, vocabulary, handwriting in the early stages? What does the staffing look like if you have a kiddo with more significant needs? Are there aides available to work with the child if he or she is struggling? What accommodations does your kiddo need? And is the school able to make those within reason? Are there any students that have a diagnosis of dyslexia that are currently attending the school? Are there staff members that are trained in the science of reading? What are the grade level language arts expectations? So I think some of those questions, that's a good starting point. And then if you don't feel that you have the expertise to analyze, what the school is doing with their curriculum or what they have to offer, find someone who can help mentor you and guide you.
And certainly if there's a parent that has more questions, I'm happy to have them reach out to me, and then, we can funnel them your way too if we need to.
Happy to just serve as a resource to help guide parents in that way as well.
Oh, that's awesome. And you do tutoring as well?
I do, yeah. I'm licensed to practice speech pathology, and also literacy intervention falls within my scope of practice as well in Kansas and Missouri and California. So I live in the Kansas City metro, and so I can provide in-person speech therapy and literacy intervention to kiddos in the Kansas City metro. But then I also can provide teletherapy services in Missouri and California as well.
Awesome. No, that's great to know, because I'm sure that there's parents that are out there, hopefully in your area, that could use your support as well. Just kind of as we wrap up, what do you think that there's one thing that people maybe understood more about the relationship with differently wired brains and classical education style? Anything that we haven't hit on yet?
Yeah, I think classical education could maybe sound a little bit daunting to some individuals who aren't maybe quite familiar with it. I just want to answer this question by, can I just share some of the things we've done in our second and third grade classroom
Yeah.
this year? And then I just want to let listeners to decide for themselves. Does that seem like something that could be a good fit for my kiddo or a kiddo possibly with dyslexia? It's just been amazing reflecting on what we've been able to do. And I have to just give credit to our leadership and our headmaster, who's just put together an absolutely amazing program. So got to give credit where credit is due. But, we studied ancient cultures and history with hands-on projects. We built, Egyptian pyramids with sugar cubes. We made Egyptian collars with tempera paints. We memorized with hand gestures the first 68 events of our history timeline. We played the royal game of an ancient Mesopotamian board game. We molded and painted replicas of ancient pottery. We studied biology. We studied animals, the human body, plants. We observed how mushroom spores travel in the wind. We went on nature walks to observe bird nests. We dissected an owl pellet and identified bones. We observed live worms and studied insects. We watched our butterflies emerge from their cocoons last week. We made candy models of DNA. We learned songs, jingles related to grammar, learned how to classify those sentences, memorized the 8 parts of speech. We did movement breaks and free dance breaks during our grammar jingles. We built foil boats in math to see how many grams our boats could hold. We worked all year on the Stomachian puzzle, which is purportedly the first puzzle designed by Archimedes and can be solved in 536 different ways. We memorized and recited poetry. We had reading buddy time with kindergarten and first grade. We read countless books, sang countless songs. We read Peter Pan aloud during lunch and celebrated with a book party, turned our classroom into Neverland, brought the book to life with costumes, foods, games, and crafts. Next week, we're capping off our ancient history studies at the end of the year with a Greek Olympics field day. At our end of the year showcase, students are making and selling items using real money to put their math skills into action by practicing making change. And this was just our first year. So you asked me about neurodivergence in classical education, and my question would be, do you think your neurodivergent child or a neurodivergent child could thrive in this environment? So my opinion and my answer would be a resounding yes.
Absolutely. What I heard was so much hands-on learning, which
Absolutely.
is so awesome for all brains, right? Like,
Yes.
all brains learn
Yes. All
better that
brains.
way.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, but especially the dyslexic brain that is challenged when it comes to just rote, reading and just answering questions and trying to process and guess the right answer on the test, which is literally what happens for most of us, right?
Right. Right.
It is so much more. It's tangible learning that they're going to take into the real world, and they're going to understand that weight and grams, and they're going to think of those boats and the sugar cubes, and like they are going to remember the teaching and how it related to their world in such a special and different way than so many children are exposed to. So I truly encourage just parents to go check it out, right? Just make an appointment and go walk around a classical academy, talk to some parents in your local community. That most communities have one now.
Yep.
There's some, at least, like collaboration pods or a Hillsdale curriculum type of school that you can reach out to and at least get started there. But we'll put some resources in the show notes too, just so people can reach out to us or the classical school kind of some of the bigger ones. One final question for you, because I think this is really important and I don't know the answer to it. And I just selfishly want to know the answer. What are the reading programs? I think you mentioned yours
Hmm.
earlier that you
Hmm.
use, but what
Hmm.
are like the key ones that you would kind of recommend? If we hear those would make our ears perk up in a positive way.
Yeah, there's so many good ones. So in the classical schools, I've seen Spell to Write and Read. Logic of English is a phenomenal program. All About Reading is a great program. All of these programs are built based on that Orton Gillingham Science of Reading research. There's some additional resources like Gerrity, phonological awareness skills. I would say those are kind of three big ones. There are other programs that public schools are using that are Science of Reading aligned, like 95%, UFly. But I would say, Spell to Write and Read, Logic of English, and All About Reading are three really good programs.
Awesome. Those are awesome. I'm gonna have to go back to our school and see which one we're using.
There's others. There's others too. So it's not just those three.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa, for spending time with us today and answering questions. And I think, as I was listening to you talk, I was like, oh my gosh, we could go down so many different paths on this. But I would love, the Latin piece, we didn't really touch on that, but that's a huge part of the classical learning model as well. And a little bit scary for us dyslexics who already are challenged with reading to begin with.
Yes.
So yeah, I think we could go 100 different ways with this. I so
Absolutely.
appreciate your time and energy you put into this. And I think all the parents listening appreciate it as well. So a big thank you from them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really enjoyed getting to chat with you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Until next time, friends, enjoy that a unique brain you've been given. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, I would love it if you would consider subscribing. It is literally the best way you can support our work here. And if you're feeling extra generous, take a screenshot and tag us on social with one of your takeaways from the episode. Until next time, friends, embrace that unique brain you've been given.